Well, today we are here to celebrate the happiest place on earth. For 70 years, Disneyland has created magical experiences for guests of all ages, and I'm thrilled to be hosting a panel celebrating this legacy. Disneyland holds a special spot in my heart because I was lucky enough to grow up 15 minutes from the OG park. And amazing. Any animators out here? Yes. So once a year, my mom would wake up all the kids on a school day, we never knew when, and she would whisper in our ears, "Today, you're not going to school. Today, we're going to Disneyland." And I just felt like, yes! As an adult, I fully understand now that my mom probably just woke up that morning and wanted to ditch all of her own responsibilities. Yeah, and go to the park when the lines wouldn't be as long, but I'm not throwing shade. I think that is the Disney magic right there. Well, our panelists also have a deep connection to Disneyland, so I think it's time we bring them out. Please welcome innovative Imagineer Emo O'Brien, Disney legend and author of The Happiest Place on Earth, Don Hahn, and Oscar and Emmy-nominated filmmaker with deep Disney roots, Leslie Iwerks. So Disney is celebrating its 70th anniversary. Oh my goodness. Emo, tell me, what does the resort mean to you?
Well, you know, it's funny. I grew up in Ohio, so I actually didn't get to Disneyland until I was an intern with Walt Disney Imagineering. And that picture there on the left, that was my first visit ever to Disneyland. So pretty cool. But I have actually been involved with the Disneyland Resort now for almost 30 years. I worked on the original Disney California Adventure Park, Trader Sam's, if any of you are familiar with that. That's Cars Land, another one, So I actually am very deeply connected to the resort. But my very favorite memory that I have of the resort was actually not very long ago. It was on Disneyland's 70th birthday. And I had the opportunity to take a Make-A-Wish kid around Radiator Springs. Her name is Madison. And I knew that Leslie was going to be there that morning, so I actually reached out to her and I said, "Hey, this girl Madison is obsessed with you. Would you mind coming out to meet her before we go in the gates?" And so she did, and it was just the most beautiful, exciting morning I could ever have.
Leslie, you're making dreams come true.
Yeah, it was all about the Imagineers, trust me. But I was so lucky to meet Madison down at Disneyland, and it was what an honor on the 70th anniversary to be with her. But I grew up behind the scenes at Disneyland. I used to go in the back lot all the time with my dad, and I always thought I kind of grew up a little screwed up because I saw all the things behind the scenes that nobody gets to see instead of going to the front gates. But so I really instilled in me this excitement around how things are done and how things are made and the magic behind the scenes. And so cut to a number of decades later when I'm in Pirates of the Caribbean, one of my favorite attractions of all time, and I am with Marty Sklar interviewing him for the Imagineering story, and he was telling me just the sort of the machinations of what made this attraction so great, the creative imagination and technical know-how, and what a blending that was for those early Imagineers. So that was probably one of my favorite times at Disneyland.
That's amazing. It's so you're inspiring and inspiring. Don, I'm sure you have an equally inspiring story about Disneyland. Share.
I do. For the younger people in the audience, before the internet and TikTok, we had polka bands. Thank you. And when I got to go to Disneyland, it was a very special thing, as it was for all of us, and still is. And when I was about this age, that's young Donnie Hahn on the left, with my brother and sister, Jim and Kathy, I felt so excited that I would set aside the clothes for Disneyland because they were my lucky clothes, and in particular, my lucky underwear. And I swear I would put it out 3 or 4 days in advance because I knew that would be my lucky underwear, and when we got home, Much to my mother's dismay, I would wear the lucky underwear for many days after we got it. And
So this was the impetus for your book, The Happiest Place on Earth?
yes. And I'm not wearing my lucky underwear. I've given it to Becky in the archives.
It's on display in the archives now, right?
That'll be a panel later today. I had a great collaborator on this book. So, listen, my life is an animation, and once I dug into this topic, I found out, so much of Disneyland was unearthed and designed by animators, people in the film business. Amazing people, all the legends from our lives that designed it, the Mark Davises and so many Herb Rymans and things like that. My co-author, Chris Merritt, is a former Imagineer who knows an incredible granular amount of Disney history. So between us, it was a 3-year collaboration on trying to dig up images you hadn't seen before and to tell stories you hadn't heard before. One of the stories, for example, was about the Chicago Railroad Fair. In 1948, Walt was just having a midlife crisis of sorts, and he grabbed Walt Kimball, the great Walt Kimball, and took him back to Chicago for the celebration of the 100th anniversary of the rail travel in the United States. And there, they had all of the kinds of things that eventually would end up in Disneyland. He also went to Greenfield Village, Henry Ford's place, and yeah, thank you, a lot of Henry Ford fans out there. And they went there. We weren't quite sure they went there until our researcher dug up an actual guest book from there in the Chicago Natural History Museum. And if you click ahead here, you can see that they signed in to this guest book, and you can see Walt's signature, and it is Retlaw Yensid. So he was obviously keeping a low profile, and Walt Kimball, chief guy, which I absolutely love. The Imagineering archives is stunning, and they brought out maps for us that hadn't been seen in 70 years. And that kind of research and access is something that you just can't imagine what it's like. And especially for me, and seeing these drawings by Harper Goff, when Disneyland was going to be on Riverside Drive, right opposite the studio, Walt said, hey, it's like Universal. Walt went to Universal City when he came out here in 1923 and wandered around for days. And so we thought, let's have one of those next to the studio. And so they started to design this. And then his ambition outgrew those plans. And the city of Burbank was crazy about having a theme park in their backyard. What were they thinking? And so they started to do plans like this. And what's amazing about this drawing, and it's a very rare drawing that hadn't been posed before, is you see a hub in the middle of it. And that is the signature of what was starting to be very special about Disneyland. Disneyland was a walkable movie. I want to change the way you think about Disneyland and the Magic Kingdom when you go there. It was a walkable dream. And the center of that dream was this hub. They hadn't picked the Anaheim site when they just did this drawing. Soon the Anaheim site would start to come into focus, but that hub stayed there. And so as you go into Disneyland and experience that hub is a place of comfort and empathy. It's a place where you can go and sit in the shade and on a park bench relax for a while. Or you can go have adventures in not lands, but to them they're movie genres. You can go to an adventure movie, a Western, a fantasy movie, or a movie about tomorrow. And we found a really strange photograph of that drawing laid on its side. And then we discovered Herb Ryman, a brilliant illustrator, who worked on the Emerald City for Wizard of Oz, took this drawing and put a fresh piece of paper over the top of it with Walt Disney staring over his shoulder and did this drawing. So this drawing, we often think it was the first drawing of Disneyland. There were probably 100 drawings by Marvin Davis with Walt Disney staring over his shoulder before Herb got to this amazing drawing that Roy Disney took back east to raise money for. I don't mean to shock you, but there was a woman on the site when the Disneyland was built. Ruth Shellhorn, a landscape designer, came in just during the last year, and this place was built so quickly, but she looked at and designed more around the hub, placing plant materials there, and again, thinking of Disneyland as a place away from the real world, a dream you can walk through. You enter from the parking lot and you leave your cares behind. You go under the railroad tracks, and it's like a curtain parking on a stage. and now your feet are on bricks, and you hear horses' hooves and a barbershop quartet, and you smell baked goods, and you're in another world. And that was deliberate and intentional, down to the point where Walt wanted every store on Main Street to have been in business in 1900. So they had to have been in business, including the Uptown Pharmacy, which you see here, and have things from the turn of the century, like leeches. And I think if we have a writing campaign, we can bring this back.
I'll take that note.
Yeah, I could be wrong. Yeah, but the educational opportunities to have kids be able to go in and play with those kinds of things, or see a large human cell, which was a exhibit in the back of the Uptown Pharmacy, or go visit a place like the intimate apparel store on your left, where they sold ladies' undergarments. And it's the only shop on Main Street that has a front porch for the gentleman that might think, oh, that's a little awkward, I think I'll stay outside. The ladies could go in, and there was, and I'm not making this up, a character called the Wizard of Bras inside, who told you the story of underwear. And I'll be repeating that later in the lobby if you'd like to hear that.
There seems to be a through line in your stories. I'm just pointing it out.
I apologize. The Bank of America had a branch because this was before credit cards. So you had to have a place to cash checks. That was on Main Street. The costumes are breathtaking. So Renee Conley, who won the Oscar for Cleopatra, designed the costumes for Disneyland. It was a place of story. It was a walkable dream. Harper Goff got his boats in Newport. There's a lot of Newport Beach kind of heritage here, and did photos like this that he sent to Walt. On the bottom, you see his note. Walt, look what we're doing. And this was a jungle cruise. It was in a walnut orchard, so they pulled up walnut trees and cut them in half and turned them upside down, which you see on the right side to look like scary kind of jungle things. And then they put smudge pots around the left side so that the banana trees didn't freeze at nighttime. There were more horses there than any place in Los Angeles, because you could go into the Western town and experience a Western movie with your heroes that were on TV. Davy Crockett, Zorro. You could ride a horse. You could ride in a stagecoach. You could buy a Pendleton shirt. Or you could go through this amazing castle into Fantasyland and experience places designed like this. Some built, some not, but they were places that you couldn't experience anywhere else on Earth. In Tomorrowland, which is the very last land they built, it was almost not built, it was so late. MIT designed the House of the Future that was there for 10 years. And there's a picture of Walt with Pat Otis, who was that year's Housewife of Tomorrow. More on that later. And that was the House of the Future. And again, technology was presented in an empathetic way. It was something that was humanized. This was just after the war. In fact, it was still the Cold War. And technology had not always been a friendly thing. So for Walt to start introducing these things, the Autopia, you know, the freeway system was not quite in yet when Disneyland was being built. So the interstate was going by, and this became a way for kids to go drive on the freeway like their parents would. Walt thought, though, wouldn't it be great if the little kids that can't drive had a bus to take them around? So he designed this bus with a dachshund on the side instead of a greyhound. Always thinking. And one of the more disturbing things we discovered were some of the rides that weren't built was called post drawing of a uranium punch. And it's not slightly considered. There were memos and there were people assigned to it. Small children and their parents would go in and be issued Geiger counters, as one does. And you would go through a maze where you would find active uranium, and then they would box it up and you would take it home.
Awesome. Safety first.
Yeah. Once again, we can bring that back if you want. Space was, and rockets, which had been associated with war, were presented as something very human. Now space was about travel with your family, and you could go on a flight to the moon. So it was very humanizing. You could go see Circle Vision, which your family has such deep ties to. And they're, again, very empathetic and humanist. We stand together in the center of the room as one people looking out at the world in Circle Vision. These were intentional decisions. They were accidents. I just really admire those guys and girls for thinking through these things in an era that was complicated and full of potentially, dark things out in the world. They're about optimism and humanity and empathy. So that's the book, Happiest Place on Earth.
I mean, Disneyland has been making magic because of this visionary Walt Disney. Who here has had the opportunity to see him firsthand in the new attraction Walt Disney: A Magical Life? Has anybody seen that? Could you tell us a little bit more about the attraction?
Absolutely, absolutely. So our attraction, we wanted to focus on Walt as not just a creative person, but a humanitarian and an entrepreneur. So we collaborated with Walt Disney Family Museum and Walt Disney Archives to display a bunch of historical mementos from Walt's life and representations of his legacy. There are many of Walt's personal items on loan from the Walt Disney Family Museum, for instance. Walt inspired many generations with his curiosity and determination. And our guests are just treated to the opportunity to see many of his treasures up close and very personal. So, many of these things have never been publicly exhibited before, like some original furniture from Walt's apartment that is above Main Street, above the firehouse. Our guests first get to step into this attraction. They step into the theater and experience Walt Disney: A Magical Life through the cinematic experience of One Man Street. That's where we start. But, we wanted to finish it off with something very special. So we culminate that in a visit with Walt in his office, made possible through the magic of audio animatronics storytelling. So this is put together with several historical sources featuring dialogue of Walt, spoken by him, and they're blended together to create the inspiring performance of this animatronic figure, sharing heartfelt stories and words of wisdom. This is truly a view into Walt Disney that one has to experience in person. We believe Walt's story is inspiring and it's relevant as much so today as it was when he was creating his own story. The idea of following your dreams, not giving up, which is very important, and turning setbacks into successes. He had a lot of that in his life, and he was so determined to make things a success. So we are more than thrilled to help share his journey with a new generation of guests, through an art form that Walt really pioneered himself.
It's amazing and still inspiring all of us today. Leslie, we have to talk about your family. Can you please share the legacy with our audience today?
Sure.
How your family was there at the beginning?
Well, so my grandfather, Iwerks, and Walt Disney met as teenagers in Kansas City, Missouri. Yeah, they go way back to 1919, and their first business together was the Iwerks Disney Company, and it was short-lived. Walt went on to do Laugh-O-Grams, and my grandfather was the technician and the animator behind the Alice in Cartoonland series, and then ultimately went on with Walt to design and animate Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, and then, thank you, and when Walt lost Oswald to his distributor, was there to design and co-create Mickey Mouse with Walt Disney as co-creator. So it was an amazing partnership. And he was quite the hard act to follow in many ways for me growing up. But Walt was always calling him the greatest animator in the world. And even Roy E. Disney said without there wouldn't have been a Mickey. And so he was also this amazing technical genius, and he really worked over the course of his 40-plus year career at the studio, creating lots of inventions for the studio, including the optical printer that helped to that basically combined live-action animation for Mary Poppins and Three Caballeros. and also Hitchcock's The Birds, so it's called the Traveling Net Process. He also was a designer and innovator behind the 360-degree circle vision camera system that you can see here at Epcot in China and the Canada Pavilion. So, you know, it was amazing to see my grandfather and his inspiration on my dad, who started at Disney in his 20s as a camera operator in the Bahamas on 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. It was a tough job, but somebody had to do it. And so he ended up parlaying that into a career overseeing the Disney Machine Shop at the studio, which invented, designed, built all these camera systems, projection systems for the parks and the live-action animated films for many years. So they're both Oscar winners, both Disney legends, and they have a shared window on Main Street here at Walt Disney World. And all I can say is it was a tough act to follow. But I was one when my grandfather passed away, and this is me here with a few photos I've got. And if you put little glasses on me and a little mustache and maybe a little hair, I'm kind of like maybe so I was able to do a film about my grandfather after I graduated USC called The Hand, the Mouse, and that allowed me to get to know him. And then from there, Pixar hired me to tell their story called The Pixar Story, which is on Disney Plus. And then from there, Marty Sklar said, when are you going to tell the Imagineering story? So, cut to, over a period of several years, we were traveling to all the theme parks around the world, interviewing hundreds of Imagineers. And as part of this process, we came upon, in the film archives of the studio lot, these binders that were kind of tucked away, of all listing out all these film reels that were from pre-1955, 16 millimeter, Kodachrome, Ektachrome, colored reversal stock, of 200 hours of material that we ended up finding about 80 hours of material that was pre-1955 out of all of this, and it got it transferred, and it is unbelievable. It was shot by several cameramen who Walt tasked to document the making of Disneyland, and as you watch it, it was just mesmerizing. I mean, this was kind of what Dog's book is all about, and it was like you're living in it with them. You're seeing them hammer, you're seeing them build this park, and it was truly handcrafted. You know, you got to remember, this is before cell phones, this is before computers, this is before the internet. It was before ChatGPT. So, you know, it was unbelievable, and I think we really have to look at this and say this is an amazing perspective of how hard this was. It was truly challenging. And when you think about Walt Disney, who was, you know, basically gambling his own fortune, and then he was on TV at the same time promoting Disneyland across the country to millions of people. And then you hard cut to in the field at Disneyland, and these guys are just like hammering away, and the dirt's, nothing's rising out of the ground for 6 months. And then we ended up finding all these interviews through the help of the archives and Dawn and other friends of ours that are working with us on this, of great interviews from people that were there, audio interviews that was just real about what was really happening. And so so what I'd like to share with you today is the genesis of what we're working on, which is a new documentary about the making of Disneyland, told through rarely and never before seen archival footage and sound bites, told through the people who were there, that captures the legacy and the nostalgia of the creation of Disneyland. So I'm very excited to share with you all. You're the first to see it. Would you like to see a little teaser?
The people of this country are about to see and hear a new adventure and entertainment. It will come upon the American theme shortly under the title of Disneyland.
Walt Disney is the greatest creative genius in the entertainment business. He's brought new concepts to the theaters and entertained millions and millions of people.
It was quite a building there, and
He deserves it.
well, that's what worried me, you know.
his own mind set a deadline that was impossible to make and opened in July of 1955.
You got those orange groves. He said, this is all top secret stuff. And I said, yeah, that's right. And I didn't bother to tell him. I thought he was out of his mind.
When Walt described this great park, I knew that this was not a good idea because who was going to drive 30 or 40 miles?
For a first-hand progress report, let's visit Disneyland now.
The thing I liked the most about those days was it was a great thing to have somebody say, well, let's do it.
What Walt started out to do, for heaven's sake, was to do something that's radically different from Coney Island to seek your dream up.
Pressures were tremendous on everybody. We all lived down there. We worked from early morning to late at night.
Most people in Hollywood thought Disneyland would be a Hollywood spectacular, a spectacular failure. But Roy Disney said, what do you mean, most people in Hollywood? He says, that's what I thought.
It was just like a great big panic. As a miracle as it ever went on, and just as it was a miracle that Disneyland ever got open.
It was so wild to see that footage that was just orange groves and know that in a year he built an absolute miracle. And that 70 years later, we're still celebrating this legacy, we're still having these conversations, we're still discovering new footage, and new bodies of work are still being created based on this story. No matter what park you're in around the world, you can trace that feeling you get when you walk through the gates back to the original vision of Disneyland. I think it's safe to say that everyone in this room loves Disneyland, but since we're here in Walt Disney World, wouldn't it be fun to hear something special for Disney World too? So, to close this out, please welcome to the stage Walt Disney Imagineer Chris Beatty.
Hi. Oh, this is awesome. And big.
Yeah, so tell us what's going on over here on this side of the country.
Well, I mean, first, we have a lot going on here at Walt Disney World. Thank you. But I just have to say first, I think since we were talking about Walt Disney and, I just thought it was a Magical Life was such a beautiful tribute to Walt, and just done in an amazing way. And it's only fitting, I think that show shares the stage with great moments with Mr. Lincoln, because as all of you know, Walt being heavily involved in the World's Fair, it just made sense, I thought. And it's such a great show. Disneyland had such a huge impact on the World's Fair, but I like to think that the World's Fair had a big impact on Disneyland. I mean, think about it. Disneyland still has great moments with Mr. Lincoln. It still has the primeval world dioramas. It still has a small world. It has, I know, right? It still has 3 of the 4 attractions operating there today in Anaheim. But there's one that is not in Anaheim, that is right here at the Magic Kingdom at Walt Disney World. Yeah. And that is, of course, the Carousel of Progress. So, Carousel of Progress, over the years, we've updated the carousel, we've made changes, but it's really not had a major update since 1993. Probably before most of you were even born. I am pleased to announce, and the reason I'm here today is to say that after more than 30 years, we're going to give Carousel of Progress an update. The attraction has Walt's name in the title, so we think it's only fitting that Walt Disney himself introduced the show in a brand new scene.
That'll be cool!
So we have lots more details to share, including what John, Sarah, and the whole family have been up to over these years. But just rest assured, at a later date we'll share those details. But just rest assured that the Carousel Progress is going to keep on spinning for a whole new generation of fans.
Really moving that, a great maybe from tomorrow really is just a dream away.
Honoring the legacy and history of Walt Disney has led to so much innovation, past, present, and future. This update to the Carousel in Progress is such a perfect example of that. Thank you all so much for coming today. We hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. Destination D23.